What is going on, basketball lovers and hoopheads? Welcome back to Checkup, where I'm Bryce, your host. As always, you take through what should be your favorite basketball content at this point. I released a video last week where I talked about some of my favorite hypothetical trades as we were leading up to the trade deadline. And now today I'm going to talk about three of the most intriguing teams to me at this trade deadline. Now, what qualifies as intriguing to me? So the three teams that I have selected are all teams that theoretically could be contenders in this upcoming NBA playoffs. I'm not focusing on teams that, you could argue should be sellers. I'm not talking about teams that could quote unquote make a star trade, but even after the star trade, are they contenders? No, I'm talking about teams that I think are pretty close to winning an NBA championship, and do they do something here in the next couple of weeks to really solidify their role as championship contenders? So that's going to leave out a couple of teams that, to me, although they are fun to talk about, at the end of the day, I don't think anything that would happen at the trade deadline changes any real outcome for this NBA season. Let's talk through a couple of the quote-unquote honorable mentions here. One of the honorable mentions here is going to have to be the Milwaukee Bucks. There's lots of back and forth about whether they should trade Giannis, whether they will trade Giannis. Is it a possibility? Will Giannis ask out? Will Milwaukee just do it? Will another team blow them away with an offer? There's a lot of ifs, ands, or buts, and not a ton of time left for something like that to happen. Giannis is giving a bunch of cryptic quotes as of late about how he's unsure or unconfident as it pertains to his status as a Milwaukee Buck in the future, but I just don't think there's enough time for a trade to materialize. At the end of the day, I don't think the Bucks do anything particularly interesting or crazy at the deadline. Another team that is of some interest and could definitely be included on this list is the Houston Rockets. While, yes, it is obvious that they have a need for a point guard or another perimeter scoring talent, another ball handler, I think they have hope that Fred VanVleet could come back this season, and I think that team would rather play out their chances with Fred VanVleet coming back than they would make a big move for a splashy perimeter name at this point in the season. So I think any trade that the Rockets are or will make at this deadline isn't necessarily a trade that will vault them so far forward in contender status to me. Another name that's been brought up a ton is the Golden State Warriors. I would say they're an interesting team to talk about, but now that we've had the very, very unfortunate Jimmy Butler ACL tear, I just don't know what to think, and I don't know how to wrap my head around what they should do, what they will do. I don't think they know what they should do or what they will do, so I'm just going to let that one play out a little bit. I don't think I have anything super interesting to say about them. And the last team I'm not going to mention today is going to be a team that, while I think it would be super intriguing to see them make a trade, from all the reporting that's out there, all the buzz in the trade world, it doesn't sound like anything's going to happen, and that would be the Detroit Pistons. Again, like I said, I think they have some glaring issues that they could theoretically address at the trade deadline and really bolster their roster heading into the playoffs. But if you go listen to my most recent episode of my podcast, I do make a comparison between the Pistons of this year to the Oklahoma City Thunder of the 23-24 season, where that Thunder team had the ability to go out and make upgrades to their roster, but instead they chose to wait it out until the playoffs and make sure that they were totally sure of what changes they wanted to or needed to make, and then made those changes in the offseason. And I think Detroit will do something similar. So while they are a fun team to talk about, I just don't think it's really realistic that they will actually do anything. So with those mentions out of the way, let's get down to the actual teams. Three teams that I think genuinely could make a trade that could shape the playoff landscape in some way. New York, New York, New York, what do we do about you? So if you've been sleeping under a rock, the New York Knicks have had a bit of an interesting stretch in their season. Interesting in a bad way, I would say. They've been pretty rough as of late, although they rebounded with an incredibly monstrous beatdown against the New York Nets, the Brooklyn Nets, excuse me, the other night. But there has just been a lot of kind of turmoil within this team, and it seems like the chemistry for them is not really there. Maybe this team isn't quite gelling under Mike Brown the way that I think the front office is hoping that they would. There's been a lot of Karl Anthony Towns chitter chatter just again about his uncomfortability and how he's not super happy in Mike Brown's system. His usage rate this year, especially with Jalen Brunson off the floor, has gone down pretty significantly, and he seems to be suffering for it. His stats are pretty down across the board. He's having one of the worst stretches of his career, since kind of the Knicks won the cup, which is super shocking. And there's kind of been the semblance of some desperation moves coming out of the Knicks. Like maybe, just maybe, they don't believe in Karl Anthony Towns as the second guy in a championship team. I don't either, for the record. But, the Knicks before the season did have some belief in their guys. But now it feels like maybe that belief is waning. So it appears like leading up to the deadline, there's a chance we could see a big splashy move from them. It would be pretty hard, I think, to figure out a trade in the middle of the season with Karl Anthony Towns. Who did they trade him for? He's got a huge contract. Who wants him? How do they get positive value out of him? There's a lot of questions to be answered there, but now it feels like there is a genuine possibility in the next couple of weeks that we could see something crazy happen with Karl Anthony Towns. And even if we don't, before all of this Towns kind of drama was unraveling, there was a lot of, rumors and talk swirling about them wanting to make an upgrade somewhere in their bench, particularly with Guerschon Yabusele's contract, who's been a bit of, he's underperformed as far as the Knicks were hoping when they picked him up in the offseason. So the Knicks were already rumored to want to bolster their bench just a little bit more and kind of make a change. But now, with all of the weird stuff that's been happening with Karl Anthony Towns, it appears as though there's certainly a possibility that he could get moved. And now again, for who, how, for what, what are the Knicks sending out? What are they getting back? I have no idea. I doubt something like that happens, but you have heard inklings and sprinklings of something like that. So I guess we will see in the coming weeks what happens with the Knicks. But, they were my pick preseason to come out of the East and make it to the finals. If you asked me right now, I probably wouldn't pick them as my favorite, but they definitely be, 2 or 3 on that list. Let's see what happens as we get closer to the deadline. Leon Rose has a ton of pressure on him. James Dolan came out, this was a couple weeks ago, maybe almost a month ago at this point, and said, in his first public interview in 2 years or something like that, and said, we expect this team to make the finals. That is the expectation, is that we make the finals. So obviously there is a ton of pressure coming from ownership to make this a championship level team. So maybe the Knicks do something different, do something desperate. We've seen them make shocking moves like the Mikal Bridges one before. The original Cat trade was a big shock to a lot of people. So who knows? I'm sure they're working the phones, and I think we'll definitely see New York's names in the headlines leading up to the trade deadline. I did just want to mention real quick, just for the sake of theoreticals, right? 2 of the names that were kind of lauded about if the Knicks were to move on from Karl Anthony Towns for some reason, one of them being Jaren Jackson Jr. was an interesting target that I've heard thrown out there, and then the other one being Anthony Davis. I personally, again, am just very anti-trading for Anthony Davis at this point, but if the Knicks wanted to theoretically go more defensive minded, I guess they could talk themselves into AD, but I think that would be a mistake. JJJ is a super interesting name to throw out there. I'm not sure how willing the Grizzlies are to move on from him right now. Do they really want to just set the reset button altogether? What are their expectations in, getting back for him? I don't think the Grizzlies would trade Jaren Jackson Jr. for Karl Anthony Towns straight up, so you probably have to have some weird 3-team deal. I don't know, but those were 2 names that I've heard associated if they were to make a big shakeup leading up to the deadline. The next team that I believe needs mentioning here is the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Timberwolves are are such an enigma to me, and they're really hard for me to figure out. If you pick any 2 week sample from them, you could say either this is one of the top 3 teams in the NBA, or you could tell me that this is one of the worst teams, or this is a play-in team in the NBA. I don't know. They're so up and down. They're so inconsistent. They go through these cycles where they beat good teams like the Thunder, or and then they beat the Rockets, or they beat the Spurs or whoever, and then all of a sudden you're looking up and they're losing to the Jazz and Pelicans, and you're like, what the hell happened? How did we get here? They're just super up and down team. They ride the vibes wave super super hard. Some weeks are good, some weeks are bad, and they're a super interesting team, and they've been a little bit better this year than maybe I had anticipated. They had a super strong finish to their season last year. Obviously, they made the Western Conference Finals again last playoffs, so maybe I should have expected them to be a little bit better, but again, I had this gut feeling that they were going to be a little bit more up and down than they have been. They had a rough start, but they've been pretty strong as of late. And that is what makes me wonder whether they make a trade. Now, it's no secret that the Timberwolves could really use a point guard. Their starting point guard right now is Dante DiVincenzo, who, pretty easily, arguably, is not a point guard. Famously, he's really just a floor spacer for them, and a good floor spacer at that, but he's not a ball handling guy. Where the Timberwolves get caught into a trap is typically because all of their guys that handle the ball can be turnover prone and can be pretty poor decision makers. Anthony Edwards kind of fluctuates with how good he is at dealing with doubles. Some nights it looks like he's on it. Some nights he is not on it. Julius Randle, much the same. I think he's a pretty questionable passer and ball handler. And then a couple of their other guys who handle the ball a lot, again, like Dante DiVincenzo and Naz Reid, are not super adept passers or playmakers or anything. So they can go through stretches where, and we saw this when they played the Thunder in the playoffs last year, where their ball handlers are just completely overtaxed by opposing defenses, and they just get into these ruts of poor decision making and bad shot taking. They're not making their open shots. They turn the ball over a ton, and then they just get discouraged because, again, they're pretty heavily a team that relies on vibes. Now, the most encouraging thing for the Wolves this year has just been Anthony Edwards kind of elevating his play. He has been damn near a first-team All-NBA guy to me this year, averaging almost 30 points a game. They're putting the ball in his hands a lot more than they have in the past to kind of, in an attempt to turn him into their primary initiator. I think they've had some success with that, incremental success, but again, still, he has moments where I don't think he handles doubles all that well, but his clutch time play has also been exceptional. If you haven't seen the stats, he's shooting like almost 70% in clutch games this year for the Wolves, and that is completely absurd. So with how volatile things feel at sometimes in the NBA world, all you need is to catch a good streak, a couple of good matchups in the playoffs, maybe, a quote-unquote lucky injury for the other team, and all of a sudden you could be looking at making another Western Conference Finals run with this team, or even better, and what they're hoping for is an NBA Finals run. I think really, though, in order to do that, they need to make a trade for like a high-level ball handler. I'm not sure who the name is. It's pretty hard to figure out who that name is because they're only real contracts that they could use to trade for a high-level ball handler who makes a decent amount of money are Naz Reid and Dante DiVincenzo. And if you're trading off those guys, you there is a chance you could be decimating your depth to a point where it doesn't really make sense. The trade-off doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And the Wolves also don't have like a ton of super interesting young guys just sitting on their bench that I think other teams would be interested in, and they don't have a ton of draft picks either. So they're kind of stuck in this weird spot where I think they need to make a trade, because I think we're going to get to the playoffs again, and a good defense is going to catch them, is going to hound their perimeter guys. They're going to make them turnover machines, and then the Wolves are just, they're going to lose like they have the past 2 years in the playoffs. but I just don't know if they have the best vehicles or ways to get that upgrade at the ball handling position. So super, super intrigued to see what they do. I know a lot of people have talked about, like, obviously the Clippers aren't like trading James Harden anymore, but that was kind of named for them. Like, people brought up Trae Young for them, but again, he makes too much money and they can't quite make the salaries match. So I'd be interested to see if they make a trade for a guy like a Kobe White or something. A guy who's on the market, is an expiring contract, is a decent ball handler, and can maybe be a spark plug in the playoffs. Who knows? But I think there's a strong possibility that Minnesota does something at the trade deadline. Can't wait to see what it might be. This team has a ton of potential for either heartbreak or success. And I just want to see Anthony Edwards in more high-level playoff games. So, yeah, the Wolves are my, I won't say second most intriguing team at the deadline, but definitely one that I'm paying heavy attention to. And the very last team on my list of 3 that are the most interesting team for me at the deadline is the Boston Celtics. Now, if you would have asked me if I would have been predicting that, or if I would have been saying this preseason, I would have said no, absolutely not. I was very low on this Boston Celtics team coming into the year. I thought Jaylen Brown, number 1 option. When has that ever gone well? He's an inefficient guy as a number 2 option. What makes you think he's going to get better with more defensive attention? But I should just shut the hell up next time, because obviously I have no idea what I'm talking about. The Boston Celtics have been maybe the surprise of the season. They have been a ton of fun. Jaylen Brown having an incredible season worthy of MVP conversations. A lot of the role guys have elevated their play in ways I just did not see happening. Miesh Keita, Jordan Walsh, guys like Baylor Shireman and Luka Garza have given them spot minutes. Like, just a ton of guys elevating into roles that they weren't in before and contributing in ways I just did not see. So, shout out to the Celtics, man, for being the surprise of the season. And for that reason, they are super interesting at the trade deadline. Now, do I think they're going to go out and make some dramatic upgrade? No, but there's been a ton of rumors about them looking for, another center option going into the playoffs. And I think the reason that they feel desperate to upgrade that backup center role is because they seem very confident that Jason Tatum is going to play basketball this season and play meaningful basketball this season. Now, will he be fully, completely healthy? Will he be back to MVP, All-NBA level Jason Tatum? Probably not, but again, they seem very, very confident, and Jason Tatum does as well, that he will be back in some form. So with the playoffs, or with the Celtics being the number 2 seed in the East, seemingly getting back one of their best players, a guy who can contribute a ton to this team, they seem interested in upgrading their roster headed into the playoffs. And I'm just interested to see who that name ends up being, and to what extent they're willing to spend draft capital, or who they're willing to let go of in order to make that happen. They obviously went way out of their way to clear their books in the offseason, trading off guys like Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, letting Al Horford walk in free agency. They have a couple of interesting contracts and guys like Anthony Simons, but Anthony Simons, who had a slow start to the year but has come along as a bench contributor as of late. Do they want to just move off of him in favor of a front court piece? Probably, but we'll see. Anthony Simons doesn't make $0, so he could probably be a salary matching piece for a decent center. So I'm just super interested to see what happens. Again, the Celtics seem very, very confident in the fact that Jason Tatum will be playing basketball this year, which is not something that I would have guessed preseason. And so if they're confident, man, like, they've proven me wrong all season long. All season long, they've proven me wrong. So I am willing to see this out. I'm willing to see what happens. I'm willing to be interested in this team, and I'm willing to be in on them as genuine championship contenders this year. Now, again, would they be one of my favorites? Obviously not, but given how kind of weak and up and down the East has been, especially with teams like the Cavs and Knicks, who everyone preseason pigeonholed as the only 2 finals contenders, I have a lot of confidence in this Celtics team who has done it before. They are proven playoff winners. They are guys who can go out there and will and want to beat your ass. So super interested to see what happens. Again, I think they'll only make like a bit of a bit move. Again, maybe for a guy who's a backup center, maybe a guy who can split front court minutes with Nemish Queta, who's been a huge surprise this year. But still, I think that's interesting nonetheless. And I can't wait to see what Boston does coming up to the trade deadline. Brad Stevens has proven to me time and time again that he is an excellent, excellent GM and an excellent negotiator. So let's see what happens with the Celtics. Well, I think that's just going to go ahead and wrap me up here today. Let me know what you think about my selections for interesting trade deadline teams. Let me know if there are any that I missed out on that I should have talked about. Maybe there are some at the top of your list. I would love to hear them in the comments below. If this is your first time joining me, thank you. I appreciate you for making it all the way to this point in the video. If you like this, go ahead and give it a like, share it with your friends, your family, whoever. Go ahead and follow the page. I would love to have you around. And on that note, I hope to catch you all in the next video. Okay, and goodbye.